Hello? There we go. I'm going to start reading from the Mackey book in 2 minutes. 2 or 3 minutes. Not that I expect anyone to come on here. But hey, gotta try, right? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is not a topic people aren't interested in, or just I need to promote my channel, and that's one of my worst points. I am not good at selling myself. Never have been. So yeah, I just figure if it's meant to be, people will come. Build it and they'll come, right? So, well, I think it's interesting. I watch videos from life in the 40s and saw a couple about like what Christmas was like, and just um, people would get like one present in the 40s, kids. So yeah, couple more minutes. I can't wait till I get my first person in the chat. That'll be so cool. Yeah. I gotta get some fans. How do I get fans? Come on, people. Everyone's at work. I don't know. Yeah. 1 minute. We'll start. I wish I knew how to add music and titles and everything. Doing this from an old laptop that has no life. It's like I can't unplug it. It doesn't take a charge. And I'm going to try to do a video on my phone later. I know like years ago when I was trying to get into it and with my YouTube channel, I figured out how I could add music and I think I was able to put a couple of like little words and things. So I got a lot to learn. So much to learn. Okay, here we go. 400 Years by James H. Mackey. This one I looked through and got a bunch of stories about where they lived, like from late 1930s to early 1940s, and maybe one or two other stories. But it's mostly this episode will be mostly about where they lived. So they lived in Dedham, Hyde Park, Norwood, then Foxborough, which turned out to be one of Uncle Jimmy's favorite places to live. I guess they stayed there 10 years, and from his memory at that time in his life, that was the longest they stayed anywhere. 10 years. And you'll see why. Some places had no heat, and probably just, neighbor issues. Who knows? So, let's see. Okay. First little blurb. We moved to Norwood in 1939. We lived on Broadway, the present site of McDonald's. The railroad tracks were behind our house. Yeah, where was it? Blah, blah, blah. Every night at 5:00, the engine would stop outside our kitchen window. I think they said they could actually like reach out, touch the train practically. So, yeah, reach out our kitchen window, and we would talk to the engineer, whose name was Randy. If we weren't there, he would blow the whistle. Wherever we were, we would go running home to talk to Randy. I attended the Winslow School. We had to line up and march in out of school to marching music. I had a friend, Norman Lanier, who played cowboys and Indians with me. We were always together. He later was killed in the Korean War. The Norwood Men's Club each year selected children from large families to go to a Christmas party at Norwood High. I was one of the children chosen. We had a dinner, and I received a basketball, a cowboy outfit with guns and holsters, and a box of candy. I remember when I lived in Norwood when I was a kid on 211 Everett Street, which is now a car dealership. Um, I was picked to go to that, and I was very young. I think I was only 4, and it was at night, and it was kind of scary, and I was tired, and I just remember not wanting to stay very long because there was a lot of people, and I wasn't used to that many people. So, okay. We only lived in Nord for about 6 months. From there, we moved to Foxborough during a blizzard. I was shoveling a driveway for a neighbor one day when one of my sisters, I can't remember which one, came running up the street and said, "You'd better get home. We're moving." I ran home. Uncle Pearlie Parker had borrowed an open pickup truck. All the furniture was loaded on it, and mattresses were tied on the roof of the car. I threw my shovel in the trunk of the car, and off we went to Foxborough. By the time we got to Foxborough, everything was soaking wet. We moved into an old farmhouse which had been converted to a 2-family. My Aunt Maggie and Uncle Pearlie Parker and their family had already moved in the other side several weeks before. I remember sleeping on their sofa in front of an open fireplace. I felt so good when I woke up the next morning. It was so warm and comfortable. The house was only heated by fireplaces. There was one in each room. Foxborough was my favorite place of all the places we lived. We had a lot of fun there. I was very sorry to leave. In 1941, we moved to Barrow Street in Dedham. I remember December 7th, the day the Second World War began. It was a Sunday, and my father had taken me to the dentist in Norwood where I had a tooth pulled. When we got home, the radio was on, and they were announcing the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor and that we were now at war. I hope we don't have a war. Okay. Some people I follow on YouTube, they tend to be a bit cynical. And I don't know if that's how they get views, but it seems like lately when I watch those particular channels, I always have a negative feeling. And then I go and watch something on Rumble and feel a little better because it's a better conservative perspective. And so I hear doom and gloom, blah, 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 Russia this, Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. And so then I watched the X-22 report and felt a little bit of confidence, and it gave me a little hope because, I had been just like trying to put in perspective what's going on in the world and what can we expect. So anyway, where was I? Okay. Oh, going back in time, I guess I skipped a page that I was supposed to read. I guess they were in East Dedham in 1937. It says we moved to 28 Walnut Street, East Dedham, about 1937. Our neighbor Joe Walsh, who was a teenager at the time, took me places and gave me rides around the neighborhood in a wheelbarrow. I thought he was a great guy. I can remember the 1938 hurricane. Bud, his brother, Uncle Buddy, and I were stealing apples from someone's tree, and the wind blew the tree over. We stuffed all the apples in our shirts and struggled to get home, which was about a mile away. So he was only about 4 years old, I guess. That's a long way to walk for a little 4-year-old with a shirt full of apples in the snow. And then it says, tree limbs and electrical wires were down everywhere. And I remember stepping over the wires that were sparking in the street. Wow. In 1939, my mother was confined to a bed because of a difficult pregnancy. I was the only one not in school, and I was on my own. So he was 5 years old here. Listen to this. This is amazing. It just gives a perspective of how things were so easygoing back then. So I was the only one not in school, and I was on my own. I would get up and get myself dressed and head for the bakery shop, where I would stand in front of the window at 5 years old by himself. The owner would come out with cookies for me. From there, I would go to the bowling alley, which was located in the basement of old Gates Drugstore. Gates Drugstore. I'm in Massachusetts, so the Gates connection is pretty much all over the place around here. Wonder if they somehow were related. So yeah, I would go to the bowling alley, which was located in the basement of Gates Drugstore in East Dedham Square. I would watch people bowl and eat my cookies. From there, I would go to the pool room, which was across the street. It was located over the First National store. I knew everyone in the town and had a regular route. Visiting people who I knew would give me something to eat. It was a regular routine. This I found interesting. There was a loading platform at the rear of Rosen's hardware store. The local alcoholics congregated there under the loading platform. Some even lived there. I went under there to visit them. They were always good to me, and I never had a problem with any of them. Wow. Amazing how things were back then. And I guess when, before I went to live with the Mackeys, my mother used to stick me on a bus in Boston and just tell the bus driver what stop to let me off at. And I guess my grandparents would be waiting for me. So Boston was a small town back then, and everyone knew each other and pretty much stuck together and probably looked out for each other. Can't imagine ever doing that because I was probably only 2 or 3. Okay. So now we're back up to the 1940s. So yeah, so they went to Barrow Street in 1941 in Dedham. Yep, and let's see. We lived on Barrow Street only about a year, then moved to Hyde Park Avenue in Reedville. That's Canton, or part of Canton. It was the same apartment we lived in 1936, so he was 2 years old then. We stayed there for a short while, then moved to 185 Buzzy Street in East Dedham, next to Mill Pond. We stayed there for the winter of 1942. Living next to the mill pond, we were always on the ice. We would send the big kids out first to see if the ice was safe. Then we would go on the ice and jump up and down to crack it. We'd keep running across it until it broke and someone would fall in. We call that playing tiddlywinks. I don't know where that name came from. In the spring of 1943, we moved up the street to 210 Buzzy Street, which is was a single house they rented for $12 a month. Wow, I'd stay there for $12 a month for a long time. Wow. We lived there for 10 years. Oh, this was the place we stayed for 10 years. We lived here for 10 years, which was the longest time they ever stayed in one place. The first day we moved in, I was 9 years old. I walked out of my front door, and 6 brothers from next door came charging at me, hollering, "Let's get him!" I ran back in the house, went in the cellar, and grabbed a hatchet and ran out the front door, screaming and yelling and waving the hatchet. They all scattered, with me chasing them around the house. Finally, they stopped running and hollered from a distance, "You're crazy! Do you want to be friends?" And we did become friends for many years. Wow. So it said the house had a central heating system with a coal-fired boiler. The first winter we had heat. The price of coal went up, and my father refused to pay that high price. So we never had heat again. So that's 8 years without heat. Because 8 or 9 years without heat. If they lived there 10 years, wow. Yeah, so yep, so we never had heat again except for the kitchen stove. We practically lived in the kitchen all winter near the stove. When it was time to go to bed, we would put on double thickness of clothing. I remember heating the flat iron in the kitchen on the kitchen stove, wrapping it in a towel and putting it under the covers at the foot of the bed to keep my feet warm. It was so cold upstairs you could not have any water in a glass, or it would freeze and break the glass. In the morning, I would press my thumb against the frost on the inside of the window to melt it so I could look outside to see what the weather was like. Okay, and the last one. Da, 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 da. I always earned my own money, starting when I was old enough to shovel snow and mow lawns. When I was in high school and high school, I worked after school for a brick mason. I mixed the mortar, carried the bricks, and helped build chimneys. I made 50 cents an hour. Wow. My first full-time job was at an auto salvage yard. I operated a small crane, cut up old cars, and removed parts. I worked 56 and a half hours a week for $28. I paid board out of that and had $13 left over for my expenses. Next, I started working with my father at Hyde Park Automobile Company in Hyde Park as a mechanic's helper. I made $33 a week. Wow. We've come a long way, people. Well, I hope someday some people are interested in this, or, I just get better at doing this and make it more interesting. I'd love to have more people. Like and subscribe, even if you don't like it. Or just tell people like and subscribe. Because eventually I'd like to monetize, but, I guess I better find more interesting content for people. All right. Thanks for watching.